What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Thursday, November 9th edition of the NBA Lineup Generator video. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoneyDFS. And we're going to walk through the NBA Lineup Generator for DraftKings and FanDuel for tonight's two-game NBA slate. Things can get a little bit weird on these short slates since there's fewer options to choose from. You still need to find some value, so you can get some weird names. It will probably be pretty interesting to see who's showing up. So we're going to look at that. But first, give us a like and subscribe so you can keep up with all of our shows. Once you subscribe on YouTube, hit that notification button to get alerts when our shows go live. Now, starting on the DraftKings side, we are going to choose all lineups here. Now, this is a setting that if you are using the tool yourself, you can choose chalky lineups, balanced lineups, contrarian lineups, depending on what type of tournaments you're playing. If you're playing your large field, very top heavy, 100K to first, you could go with contrarian lineups, and that's all you will see. If you're playing smaller field stuff, you can choose chalky, and that's all you will see. But I'm going to go with all lineups here. Now, it is still going to give us lineups that we expect to be profitable over time. This tool does use our simulations, our projections, and our ownership projections on the back end to find profitable lineups and then gives you the end result. So now it's just giving us lineups that it doesn't matter if we're telling you we don't have a preference if they're chalky or not. We just want profitable lineups, and then we can go through and choose the lineups that we want ultimately. Now, here you can select the player to have in all of your lineups if you want to. This isn't something that I would do, but maybe if you're playing one lineup, you know that you want Markelle Fultz, you just click Markelle Fultz, and it will only give you Markelle Fultz lineups. But I'm going to skip over that, and I'm just going to grab the first 20 lineups here. But again, if you're using this on your own, even if you selected that all lineups option, maybe you don't want the chalkiest lineups. And so, for example, here you can see these sliders down here. Projection very high, ownership is very chalky. Maybe you would discard this one. Now you get this lineup that isn't super contrarian, but at least it's not at the top of the charts in terms of chalk. So you still have the ability to choose those lineups. It'll keep giving you lineups until you have as many as you need. You can get up to 20. You can export up to 20. And now we're going to view those 20 lineups that I selected, basically the first 20 that we got. And starting with the individual player exposures, Onyeka Okongwu coming in at the top, 85% of our lineups. Nothing too surprising there. He's only $4,200. He's one of the best value plays on the slate. He's one of the highest owned guys on the slate, projected for 66% ownership right now on DraftKings. Giannis coming in second at 75%. We haven't played a lot of Giannis this year because Damian Lillard has cut into his rates, and he doesn't play as many minutes as players that are typically priced in his price range. But with this being a two-game slate, he is the highest projected player on the slate. Damian Lillard is also questionable, so there's a chance that by the time we get the lock, Giannis looks even better. Bogdan Bogdanovic has guard and forward eligibility, so he's showing up a lot in 70% of our lineups at 4,400. He is projected to be the third highest owned player on the slate. Fultz is questionable tonight. This is a key piece of news that we're going to need from the late game. We're getting 70% of him. The field is getting 70%. So nothing too crazy in these, or nothing crazy at all in these top four guys. They are the four highest projected players on the slate. Now, Jalen Smith coming in at 65% of our lineups. He's projected for 44% ownership. Backup center for Indiana, but about a 1.3 fantasy point per minute guy. Should play 18 to 19 minutes on average behind Miles Turner, but he does have the potential to play more if Turner were to get in foul trouble, or as we saw last night, Jalen Smith just played really well, and he ended up playing 25 minutes to Miles Turner's 23. That's not going to happen very often, but it is certainly in the range of outcomes. Saddiq Bey showing up in 50% of our lineups. He's projected for 36% ownership by the field. DeJounte Murray, the first relatively low-owned guy that we're getting a lot of. We're at 40%. The field's at about 22. So we're 2x the field on him. 40% Mathurin's in line with the field. 40% Banchero in line with the field. Clint Capella showing up in 40% of our lineup. So that's interesting because we see that we have 85% of Okongwu. Capella at 5,700 on a two-gamer. You can certainly play these two together. It is somewhat difficult because they are both centers. So obviously, if you have them both, you don't have any other center. But the prices do work out here. On average, you're getting 25 minutes or so from Capella, around 23 from Okongwu. You can certainly see some games where Capella plays 28 and Okongwu plays 20, or Okongwu plays 26, Capella plays 22. If you get that 28-20 game, that's probably really what you're looking for. A 27-minute game for Capella, 21 for Okongwu, or 28 for Capella, 20 for Okongwu. Because if you get that, Okongwu is still likely to pay off this $4,200 salary, even in 20 to 21 minutes, and Capella will most likely beat a $5,700 salary if he does get 27, 28 minutes. Tyrese Halliburton, 45% projected ownership. We have 40%. We're getting 35% Trae Young, pretty much in line with the field. So you are seeing that for the most part, we're not going too crazy on players that are really low owned and we're getting a lot of. We don't have any really crazy fades at the top either. And that's a function of choosing all lineups and then also not doing anything to avoid the chalkiest lineups. If you were to select contrarian lineups, you would certainly have different exposures here. So that's a preference thing. And, again, you can use this tool for yourself. We'll talk about more about that in a minute. But looking at some of how these individual lineups look, 256 DraftKings point projection here, 343% ownership. You have a 260 fantasy point lineup, 369% ownership. So 5 more fantasy points, a little bit more ownership. This one, you're giving up a few fantasy points, but you get down to 300%. Projected ownership. And if you look at them individually, 23% ownership to Murray, 40 to Mathurin, 29 to Hunter. We don't have anybody really contrarian in this lineup. Probably not something you would love in a large field tournament. If we try and find a more contrarian lineup from the ones that we just selected, 267% projected ownership. We have an 8% owned Jay Crowder, so that's kind of our contrarian play there. 16% to Miles Turner. He is paired with Jalen Smith, which I'm perfectly fine with on this slate. So ownership is always going to be higher. The aggregate ownership is just always going to be higher on your 2-game slates. But, if you are playing large field tournaments, take a look at either, just ask for contrarian lineups or spend more time going through those lineups and actually selecting ones that aren't the most popular. But with the lineups that we chose, that's what we're getting over here right now. Now we can go back and look at FanDuel, and I'll choose contrarian lineups over there to see sort of how it differs relative to the field. But before we get into the FanDuel lineups, if you haven't already signed up, we do have a full Sims package. It's $199.95 a month. You can create up to 5,000 lineups at a time, simulate them versus the field that you generate, and export as many lineups as you want. It's a great tool, great for players that are playing mid stakes, high stakes. The price point, obviously isn't perfect for everyone. And if you are someone that plays lower stakes or, you're a 20 max player or something like that, this lineup generator tool is perfect for you. It's $14.95 a week, and it will basically just give you the end result of what the Sims are doing. You're not going to have all the customization, all the ability really to make mistakes that you do with the full Sims tool, but you will get the end result as we've shown here. What this tool is doing is essentially simulating these lineups on the back end and spitting out the end result, which is lineups that we project to be profitable long term. So now for FanDuel, we are going to look at some contrarian lineups. And again, if you want to use this tool for yourself, $14.95 for a week. $14.95 per week rather, and you can sign up using the link in the description below. I will also tweet the link if you're watching this on Twitter, and it'll be below this video. Now, looking at some contrarian lineups on FanDuel, we're just going to save these first 20 and see how things look, different compared to the field relative to DraftKings. Now, looking at those lineups, we have Giannis coming in at the top, $10,600 price tag, 85% of the lineups. He is the highest owned guy on FanDuel right now at 70%. So certainly not taking any sort of contrarian stand against him. Benedict Mathurin, only 4,800 coming off of a massive 38-minute game last night. Projects for around 24 minutes tonight, but it is really nice to see that he at least has 38 minutes in his range of outcomes. Indiana's closing lineup is always very difficult to project. You essentially are going to have Tyrese Halliburton. You're going to have one of Miles Turner or Jalen Smith. You are probably going to have Bruce Brown, who we're also getting a lot of. And then you're just getting whoever's playing the best really out of Benedict Mathurin, Obi Toppin, Andrew Nembhard, Neesmith, Healed. There's a lot of different ways that closing lineup can go for Indiana. But the thing that is nice with someone like Mathurin, especially at this cheap price tag, if he only plays 23 or 24 minutes, he can still conceivably pay this off. But if he's playing well, he's likely to be in the closing lineup and get extra minutes. So at least from a tournament standpoint, it's always really nice to have someone where if their minutes are volatile, at least if they're playing well, they can kind of create their own destiny and play more minutes. Mathurin is the second highest owned guy on the slate. Bruce Brown is the third highest. So even in contrarian lineups, we're not getting too far away from those top end guys. Giannis, Mathurin, and Bruce Brown, all the highest owned players on the slate. We're getting to Markelle Fultz a lot. Again, he is questionable. DeJounte Murray showing up in 60% of our lineups. Field is projected to have 30%. So we're taking a stand on him, just like we were on DraftKings. Jay Crowder showing up in 60% of our lineups. We do have Chris Middleton back tonight, so that makes Crowder less appealing than he was yesterday. But he's only getting 20% ownership, so that's another value piece that we can take a stand on. Trae Young showing up in 55% of our lineups. The field is getting to about 38%, so we're a little bit over there. As far as players that are really popular that maybe we're not getting as much of, we are getting to all six of the highest owned guys. Jalen Johnson is pulling 52% ownership. We are only getting to 5%. So that's a spot where by just not playing Jalen Johnson, you're already becoming somewhat contrarian. That's something that I think goes overlooked, is especially on these shorter slates. The guys that you play are going to have ownership. You're going to look at the ownership numbers and, not really be excited thinking you have contrarian plays. But if 50% of the field is playing Jalen Johnson and you're just not playing Jalen Johnson, you're already different than half the field. So who you don't play also matters. And that's why I wanted to point that out. The reason we're not getting to Jalen Johnson is probably in part ownership. And then also that the forward positions are just a good place to save some money. You can save it with Bruce Brown. We're saving it with Jay Crowder. We have Banchero, who's not saving money, but he's another just good forward to get to that we're getting to instead of Johnson. And then obviously paying up for Giannis is a really good place to be as well. So looking at the individual lineups, 373% ownership coming into this one. Halliburton, Fultz, both very popular. Only 25% ownership coming into Suggs, not bad for a 2-game slate. 24% coming into Bogdanovich at 5,100. Again, not bad for a 2-gamer. Bobby Portis, pretty solid contrarian option. Only 19% owned, and he is a good point per minute guy. So if he finds his way into more minutes than usual, it's pretty easy for him to suddenly become a very good play, especially on a 2-game slate. And then a contrarian Miles Turner at 7,500, only 7% owned. Really, really strong, low owned contrarian play, given the upside he has, especially on FanDuel where you get 3 points for blocks. This lineup in the aggregate is going to be even lower owned. As far as contrarian pieces, we have a 12% owned Obi Toppin at just $4,400. So that looks like a good way to be different. We have Bogdanovich, we have Crowder, those guys relatively low owned as well. So that's the difference that you can see between the contrarian lineups and just selecting all lineups. I think the most important thing to keep in mind is that even contrarian lineups are going to have popular players, and especially on a 2-game slate, there's not much you can do about it. But who you're not playing in those lineups also matters. And being contrarian doesn't mean just playing lineups where everybody's 5% owned. It's really tough, especially in basketball, to make money that way. It's a nice balance of, finding ways to play the best projected players, but then also not have, some of the most popular guys like Jalen Johnson, for example, or have a couple of low owned guys in there like your Obi Toppins or your Miles Turners. So that's all I have for you in this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for checking it out. Good luck on your lineups tonight. And don't forget to use the link below if you want to use this tool for yourself. $14.95 per week. It will make you better. It's perfect for your smaller field, or sorry, for your 20 max or smaller field tournaments. If you're a lower stakes player, the price point makes sense. So check that out. Use the link below. And thanks again for checking out the video.